The slap cracked through the air louder than the murmur of the busy transit hall. In an instant, everything froze. A young boy, barely a teenager, stumbled backward, clutching his cheek in shock, his wide, teary eyes fixed on the towering officer before him. The officer's face was twisted in a smug scowl as he sneered. "You think you could just wander around here?" His hand, still raised as if to strike again, trembled with an arrogance born of ignorance. The boy's voice came out as a fragile whisper, barely audible. "I was just waiting for my dad." But before he could finish, the officer barked, "Shut your mouth. You have no business loitering here." In that moment, the crowded terminal fell silent as all heads turned. Passers-by, who had been chatting and rushing about, stopped and stared in disbelief. The officer's grip on the boy's wrist tightened, his eyes darting around to see if anyone would dare intervene. Then, from the back of the crowd, a tall, composed figure stepped forward. The man's face was calm, yet unmistakably stern. His presence silenced even the murmurs as he spoke in a measured tone that cut through the tension like a knife. "Let him go." The officer's smirk wavered for just an instant as he glanced at the man, a man whose posture, attire, and quiet authority hinted at something far more significant than a mere concerned father. What no one in that moment could have known was that the man standing there was not an ordinary citizen. His identity, hidden beneath his calm exterior, held a secret that would soon upend the officer's world. As the crowd held its breath, the officer's confidence began to crumble. His eyes flickered with uncertainty for the first time, and the spark of impending regret lit behind his gaze. The incident had sown a seed of doubt in every onlooker. How could someone so unyielding suddenly be questioned by a man they barely knew? And what was the true nature of this imposing figure who demanded respect without raising his voice? In that single, charged moment, the stage was set for a dramatic reversal, a twist that would reveal hidden truths about authority, respect, and the cost of prejudice. The tension was thick, the questions burning in everyone's mind. What would happen next? And just who was this man who dared to defy a racist cop in the heart of a bustling transit hall? Before we go any further, subscribe to the channel and comment below where you're watching from. For our returning subscribers, thank you so much for your unwavering support. It truly means a lot to our community. Central City Transit Terminal was a modern marvel of efficiency and diversity. Its vast concourses were alive with the constant hum of travelers, digital boards, and the rhythm of rolling suitcases. People of every background mingled in a space designed to embody progress and inclusion. Yet amid the organized chaos, shadows of outdated attitudes still lingered. Officer Ronald Price, a veteran in his mid-40s, had been on the force for over 15 years. His uniform was always crisp, his demeanor rigid, and his reputation, while once respected, had gradually been tarnished by a history of unchecked prejudice. Price believed that his role was to enforce order by any means necessary, and his actions were driven by a narrow view of what constituted proper behavior. To him, any deviation from his standards was a challenge that had to be met with force. Opposite him stood Leonard Brooks, a man of quiet strength and dignified resolve. Leonard, in his early 50s, was a familiar face in the community, known for his calm authority and deep commitment to fairness. With a strong build and steady eyes that had seen both hardship and triumph, Leonard was a man whose life had been a testament to resilience. He had worked tirelessly to provide a stable home for his family, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence that commanded respect. What made Leonard even more remarkable was the secret he had kept close. He was, in fact, the newly appointed chief of police for Central City, a detail known to only a few and kept under wraps until the right moment. The transit terminal itself was a symbol of modern urban life, an arena where the old and new coexisted. Gleaming floors, clear signage, and a multicultural mix of passengers showcased a community that thrived on opportunity and diversity. Yet, in this very place, the clash between entrenched bias and emerging progress was about to unfold in a way that would shake the foundations of authority. As the incident began, crowds gathered near a coffee kiosk and along the main corridors, their eyes wide with disbelief. Conversations hushed as people realized that something more than an ordinary dispute was unfolding. Among them, whispers of, "How could a cop act like that?" and "Who is that man?" spread like wildfire. In that charged moment, it became clear that the confrontation was not just a personal conflict. It was a microcosm of the struggle between outdated prejudice and the promise of change. Leonard Brooks had been walking slowly toward the terminal exit with his young son, Jordan, unaware of the storm that was about to engulf him. His quiet, deliberate steps and calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the aggressive actions of Officer Price. Leonard's presence was unassuming yet potent, a silent reminder that true authority was measured not by force, but by fairness and integrity. In the midst of this modern, bustling environment, the stage was being set for a confrontation that would reveal hidden truths and challenge long-held assumptions. The energy in the terminal was electric with anticipation, and every person present sensed that they were witnessing the beginning of something extraordinary, an event that would soon force everyone to confront the real cost of unchecked prejudice. In the immediate aftermath of the slap, chaos erupted in the transit terminal. Officer Price, still seething with misplaced authority, stood tall as he insisted that his actions were justified. "That boy was causing a disturbance," he shouted, his voice carrying over the hushed gasps of bystanders. But as his words echoed through the terminal, it became clear that his version of events was riddled with contradictions. Witnesses began to step forward. A commuter near the scene recalled seeing the young boy, Jordan, walking quietly with his father, his innocent eyes fixed on the world around him. "He was just a kid, minding his own business," the witness said, shaking his head in disbelief. Other passengers recorded the incident on their phones, and the footage quickly spread online. Within minutes, social media buzzed with the hashtags #JusticeForJordan and #InPoliceBias. As the incident gained momentum, Internal Affairs was alerted. Preliminary investigations revealed that Officer Price had been the subject of prior complaints, incidents where his actions had been driven by personal bias rather than genuine concern for public safety. This history added weight to the growing suspicion that the slap was not an isolated act of aggression, but part of a recurring pattern. Within the terminal, the atmosphere was charged with conflicting emotions. Many felt outraged by the blatant disrespect shown to the young boy, while others could not ignore the palpable tension that had suddenly gripped the area. Amid the mounting controversy, Leonard Brooks, known for his unflappable demeanor, calmly stepped forward to address the situation. His voice, firm and measured, cut through the noise as he demanded an explanation. "Officer Price, explain to me the justification for this act," Leonard said, his gaze steady and unyielding. The demand was simple, yet its implications were profound. Officer Price, caught off guard by Leonard's authoritative challenge, stammered incoherently. His eyes darted nervously as he attempted to reconcile his own narrative with the growing chorus of eyewitness accounts. The more he spoke, the more his story began to unravel. Internal documents later revealed that Price had a long history of similar incidents, instances where his behavior had been driven by a deep-seated prejudice that he had never been held accountable for. The tension continued to build as more details emerged. During a brief moment of calm, a security camera captured a clear image of Price's aggressive act, a recording that would later be shared widely and serve as undeniable evidence of his misconduct. Meanwhile, the passengers and employees of Central City Transit began to exchange whispered words of protest. "This is unacceptable," one employee murmured, shaking his head in disbelief. The unfolding conflict was not confined to the terminal alone. It quickly spilled over into local news coverage. A respected civil rights organization issued a statement condemning the incident, urging the police department to launch a full investigation. Legal experts weighed in, highlighting that such acts of racial aggression could not be tolerated in a society that prided itself on justice and equality. By the time the Internal Affairs team had assembled to review the incident, the public outcry had reached a fever pitch. Officer Price's actions were being dissected in every forum, from social media platforms to formal meetings of the Transit Authority. It was clear that the young boy's assault was more than a simple act of misconduct. It was a symbol of the pervasive bias that had long haunted law enforcement. As the conflict buildup reached its zenith, Leonard Brooks's earlier intervention began to echo throughout the terminal. His calm insistence on justice had galvanized many who had witnessed the incident, and his reputation as a man of integrity lent weight to the growing calls for accountability. The stage was now set for a dramatic turning point, one that would force the entire community, and indeed the department, to confront the ugly reality of racial prejudice in an institution that was supposed to protect all citizens. Every new piece of evidence and every testimonial from a witness contributed to a mounting pressure that could no longer be ignored. The community braced itself, knowing that what had begun as a single act of aggression was about to escalate into a confrontation that would redefine the meaning of authority and justice at Central City Transit. As the fallout from the incident spread, the tension at Central City Transit and within the police department escalated rapidly. Internal emails and disciplinary records came to light, revealing that Officer Price had been previously warned about similar behavior. The discovery of these records added fuel to the fire, sparking a wave of indignation among both passengers and fellow officers. In the days that followed, news of the incident spread like wildfire on social media. Hashtags such as #JusticeForJordan and #StopRacismInUniform trended locally and even nationally. Videos of the incident, shared widely by witnesses, were viewed millions of times, each playback amplifying the shock and anger felt by the community. Public sentiment was clear. No one could stand by while a law enforcement officer abused his power in such a blatant manner. Within the police department, the Internal Affairs Division, led by Lieutenant Marcus Daniels, initiated a formal investigation into Officer Price's conduct. Lieutenant Daniels was a man known for his fairness and commitment to reform, a stark contrast to the narrow-mindedness exhibited by Price. In a series of meetings with senior officers, Daniels laid out the evidence, including digital logs, security footage, and multiple eyewitness testimonies. His words were measured but firm as he stated, "We cannot allow personal bias to undermine our duty to protect every citizen. This incident is unacceptable, and we will ensure that every aspect is thoroughly reviewed." As Lieutenant Daniels took charge, the atmosphere within the department shifted. Younger officers, who had long harbored doubts about the entrenched prejudices of their predecessors, began to speak up. "We need to be better than this," one officer remarked in a closed meeting, his voice resolute. Their growing courage reflected a deep desire to see the system reformed and for accountability to be upheld. Back at the transit terminal, the impact of the incident was equally profound. Passengers, many of whom had been affected by similar acts of discrimination, organized peaceful protests demanding justice. Banners and signs bearing messages like "No to Racism" and "Equality Now" filled the public squares near Central City Transit, and community leaders called for an independent review of the entire department. The public outcry was so intense that even local government officials began to weigh in, promising that any form of racial bias would be met with swift, decisive action. The escalating tension reached its peak when a senior media outlet obtained an exclusive interview with a whistleblower from within the police department. This individual revealed that Officer Price's misconduct was part of a larger, systemic issue that had long been ignored by higher-ups. The revelation sent shockwaves through both the department and the public, with news anchors and social commentators discussing the need for reform in every form available. In response, Lieutenant Daniels held a press conference at the transit station. Standing before a large group of reporters and community members, he announced that Officer Price will be placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. "We are committed to ensuring that every officer upholds the highest standards of conduct," he stated firmly. "Today, we take a stand against prejudice and for the principles of fairness that must guide our actions." The press conference was met with thunderous applause from the gathered crowd. It marked a turning point in the narrative, a moment when the tide of public opinion began to decisively shift. As Daniels outlined the steps the department would take to address not only the incident, but also the broader issue of racial bias. It became clear that change was on the horizon. Inside the department, the investigation continued with renewed vigor. Officers who had once remained silent now testified about their own experiences and concerns regarding the culture within the force. Every piece of evidence, from internal memos to security logs, contributed to a growing chorus demanding accountability. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the belief that this incident was not merely an isolated event, but a catalyst for a much-needed overhaul of the system. By the end of this escalating phase, Central City had transformed from a place of routine transit to a battleground for justice. The intense public pressure and internal reviews converged to create an environment where every officer's actions were under scrutiny. The rising tension was now a powerful force, one that promised to reshape the future of law enforcement in the community and restore faith in the institutions meant to serve all citizens equally. The defining moment arrived on a cool afternoon when the Internal Affairs panel, led by Lieutenant Daniels, gathered in a formal briefing room at the police headquarters. The room was filled with senior officers, community representatives, and members of the media, all eager to witness the final resolution of the investigation. With a steady voice that commanded respect, Lieutenant Daniels addressed the assembled group. After a thorough review of all evidence, it is abundantly clear that Officer Price's actions were driven solely by personal bias and have no place in our force, he declared. A heavy silence fell over the room as his words sank in. Effective immediately, Officer Ronald Price is relieved of his duties pending a full disciplinary review, Daniels continued, his tone unwavering. The announcement sent shockwaves through everyone present. Officer Price, whose earlier bravado had dominated the scene, now looked diminished and visibly shaken. His eyes, once filled with unfounded arrogance, now betrayed shock and regret. At that moment, Leonard Brooks, the father of the young boy, Jordan, stepped forward. His voice was calm and resolute as he spoke. I have dedicated my life to serving this community with honor. Today, we stand together against injustice. No one should be subjected to bias, no matter who they are. Leonard's measured words resonated deeply with the audience, and a wave of approval rippled through the room. The turning point was sealed when Lieutenant Daniels presented a comprehensive dossier of evidence. Digital logs, eyewitness testimonies, and internal records that documented Officer Price's long history of similar misconduct. The evidence was overwhelming, leaving little room for doubt. As Daniels outlined the details, it became clear that the incident was not an isolated case, but a symptom of a larger, systemic problem. The once unchallenged authority of Officer Price was now exposed as a byproduct of an outdated mindset. The room erupted in a mixture of relieved applause and somber nods of approval. Daniels' decisive actions and the undeniable evidence served as a powerful statement. Bias, in any form, would not be tolerated. The turning point had shifted the power dynamic completely. The very system that had once allowed unchecked prejudice was now being held to the highest standard of accountability. The verdict was a rebuke not only of Officer Price, but of a culture that had permitted such behavior to persist. For Leonard Brooks, for his young son Jordan, and for every member of the community who had suffered under similar injustices, this moment was a beacon of hope. The shocking revelation had not only restored dignity to an innocent victim, but had also set a new precedent within the police department, a promise that no one, regardless of rank or reputation, was above the law. In the aftermath of the historic verdict, Central City experienced a profound shift in atmosphere. The removal of Officer Price from active duty and the sweeping disciplinary review initiated by Lieutenant Daniels sparked a wave of reform that spread rapidly throughout the community. Local media hailed the decision as a turning point in the fight against bias in law enforcement, and social media erupted with messages of support for justice. Leonard Brooks and his son, Jordan, returned to their daily lives with renewed hope. The painful incident, though deeply hurtful, had become a catalyst for positive change. Leonard began speaking at community events, urging residents to remain vigilant and to demand accountability from those in power. His calm yet passionate advocacy resonated with many, inspiring a movement that called for a fairer, more just system. Lieutenant Daniels wasted no time in implementing reforms within the police department. Over the next few weeks, he introduced new training programs focused on cultural sensitivity and ethical policing. Departmental policies were overhauled, ensuring that every officer would be held to the highest standards of conduct. Daniels made it clear that the days of unchecked prejudice were over, and his leadership fostered a renewed sense of trust among the ranks. Officer Price, now under full investigation, became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that no one is exempt from accountability. His case was widely discussed in local forums and news outlets, serving as a powerful impetus for systemic change. Though his future on the force remained uncertain, his downfall signaled a commitment to transparency and reform that the entire department would soon embrace. The community at Central City rallied together in the wake of the incident. Town hall meetings and public forums were held, where citizens, police officials, and civil rights advocates gathered to discuss the importance of accountability and the need for ongoing reform. Banners reading "Justice for All" and "Equal Treatment Now" adorned the streets, and a palpable sense of unity emerged among residents from all walks of life. One final community gathering took place in the courtyard outside Central City Police Headquarters. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the assembled crowd, Lieutenant Daniels addressed the people. "Today, we have witnessed a turning point," he declared, his voice firm and hopeful. "Let this be a reminder that every individual is entitled to respect and that no one is above the law. We will continue to work together to build a system that truly reflects our values of fairness and equality." His words were met with enthusiastic applause and heartfelt nods from the crowd. As the meeting came to a close, Leonard Brooks embraced his young son, Jordan, with a look of quiet pride. The incident that had once threatened to tear the community apart had instead united it in the spirit of reform. Central City was now on a new path, a path where accountability, transparency, and justice would guide every action. The legacy of that fateful day would serve as a lasting reminder that even in the face of deep-seated prejudice, the power of truth and reform could prevail.